Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today for another video, and I want to kick things off very quickly just by saying a huge thank you to everybody who watched last week's video. If you haven't seen it, I will put a link down in the description, but I took you guys somewhere very special to me. It was to the village where I spent a lot of my childhood, and I created a load of photos for the first time in that location. And I talked a little bit about the significance and the importance of those photos for me, and how that's going to create a lot of longevity and meaning in the work and in the photos that I create in the future. It's been a bit of a mindset shift, and I think that resonated with a lot of you guys. I had so many really wonderful and thoughtful comments which I really enjoyed reading, so thank you to everybody who did share their thoughts. And it got me thinking that there's more to explore around this topic, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. So to briefly summarize last week's video, for me, a beautiful photo, whether that's of a landscape, a vista, whatever that might be, a beautiful photo is not enough for me anymore. There needs to be more to it. It needs to be slightly deeper, and the appreciation for that photo needs to be less surface level and just for the visual impact of it. It has to have a little bit more meaning. And I've been trying to unpack that and figure out ways of creating that deeper meaning and connection to my work, and hopefully you can find that connection for your work too. And I'm going to give you some really, I hope, helpful tips in today's video. So I'm not going to labour the point too much because I did talk about it last week, but having a connection to the subject or the location that you're photographing is definitely the first thing that you can do to immediately find a deeper connection to the photos that you create. Whether that's going to somewhere that holds a lot of significance to you, or somewhere where you have a lot of memories, that's always going to be a great place to start. This week, me and my girlfriend Alex headed over to the island of Anglesey. It's somewhere that is really, really meaningful for us. It's where we went on our first trip together, and whenever we have time off together, it seems to be one of the places that we just are kind of gravitating back to time and time again. It's such a beautiful little island, loads of amazing coves and beaches. It's just very, very, very beautiful. And whenever I take photos there, I always feel that feeling of nostalgia, and it just kind of makes me smile, I suppose. There are memories and there is meaning attached to all of the work that I create there. But I don't think it's that difficult necessarily to find connection and meaning to the work that you create if you're going out there and you're being considerate and mindful of this when you're going to create photos and you're choosing your locations. There's always significance to be found if you search hard enough. But I think the real challenge that a lot of photographers face, especially these days, is how do we get other people, how do we get our viewers of our images to feel that same connection and to feel that same allure to the work that you share, whether that's on Instagram or YouTube or, you know, whatever platform or medium you're using to share your work. I mean, I think that is where it becomes a little bit more challenging. And that isn't always the motivation or the goal for a lot of people. Completely appreciate that, and that is a wonderful thing. To create work purely for yourself is really liberating, and it certainly is a great thing to do for your mental health, for your mindfulness, and just for your pure enjoyment of that particular hobby. But if you are really proud of your work, it's only natural to want to share that with other people, even if that's just family and friends. It doesn't necessarily need to be on social media. But I think there is a lot of joy and a lot of benefit from sharing your work with others. It really does help you grow as a photographer. And I've really gone on a journey in terms of what feels right for me, in terms of where and how I share my imagery. Now, I post on Instagram. I'll put my handle down on screen here if you're not following me already. And there's always a quote that has stuck with me when it comes to how people should view Instagram if you're doing it for, you know, business purposes, or if you're doing it as an artist or a creative. And that is, Instagram is not your portfolio. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. Now, I think a lot of photographers will post all of their great work on Instagram on their profile. They'll curate that profile to be all of their best images, and it almost becomes a gallery or an exhibition there was that craze a few years ago where everybody wanted that really cohesive aesthetic to their Instagram grid to really kind of show their visual style. But I think as Instagram has evolved and it's introduced more shorter form video and other features, I think that idea of a curated portfolio type grid is just not really that beneficial anymore, purely because, well, you're not really going to get much reach these days with photography and stills on there, which is absolutely fine. I'm not the type of person who is going to adapt to an algorithm. I don't enjoy Instagram enough to do that. But what I do find Instagram really great for is for sharing more of the behind the scenes and more of the stories behind the images that I create. I don't post an awful lot to my actual profile grid, but I do try to use stories because I do want to share a little bit more of the process of creating my work. My hope is that that insight will allow people to kind of peer behind the curtain a little bit, and it's a great way for you to share your other interests and the things that make you in terms of your, I guess, interests, the things that you are passionate about, and a little bit more of your personal life if you're comfortable sharing that. All of these things I think help people feel connected to the work of artists, whether that's photographers or any other artistic discipline. And when I think of the photographers that resonate with me and whose work I find myself coming back to, it's always because they share more than just the photos. There's a bit more of a connection between the photographer and the audience. Now, YouTube is obviously a great platform for that. It's where I do most of my work and it's why I make these videos, but I appreciate that that isn't necessarily for everybody. But if there is a way that you can show a bit more about where your photos were taken, why they're taken there, the reasons behind why you visit those locations, and a bit more about kind of your personality, I think that's a great starting point to help build that connection. It becomes less about the photos and it becomes more about you as the photographer. But I don't want to get too hung up on social media, because social media, for all of its benefits, has a lot of negatives attached to it. It's very time consuming, it can be very toxic, it can be a bit of a mental health trap, and it's not always the way that we like to create content. I love long form content. I love making YouTube videos because I enjoy cinematography and videography and storytelling, and short form content on Instagram just doesn't interest me. You'll never really see me do many reels. I'm not going to be doing sort of viral TikTok stuff because it just doesn't feel authentically me. And I think if you're a photographer looking to share your work with others, doing things that feel very much aligned with you and your personality is always the right way to do it. So there are other avenues that you can explore. A blog is another great way to do that. I have a blog on my website, which I will link down in the description, and this is a great way for me to journal about the locations and the photo shoots that I go on. This is a great way to build not only a connection with an audience, but it also helps you feel connected to your work and find that meaning in your work, which is what we're also talking about in this video. So for me, I kind of call my journal field notes, if you like. You could just do this with a traditional notebook and a pen if you wanted to, but really it's just about documenting your experience out in the field. It might not necessarily be to a location that has significance to you when you visit it. It could just be somewhere that you've seen on a map that you think has some great photographic potential. That's perfect. We should all be doing that. But if you can then start to just jot down some thoughts and some ideas of how you're feeling when you're there, the things that you notice, just kind of treat it as a bit of a diary. Then when you come back and you revisit that, whether that's just through flicking through the notebook or whether that's, putting it online on a blog that you can come back to, just treating that blog as a gallery of those photos maybe, so you don't lose them in hard drives and in all the other places that photos tend to go missing. I think that's a great thing to reflect on and look back on. I guess it harks back to that idea of getting your photos developed and getting those tiny little photos in the little wallet that you would have as family snapshots back in the day. My mum still has a suitcase full of those in her attic, and we periodically will go through those, and those photos are not necessarily groundbreaking in terms of their technique, their skill, their execution, but they are wonderful photos that I always really enjoy flicking through. So we can just adopt that similar process, but just bring it to 2024 and do it online in a blog if we want to. I always think that that is something that's worth pursuing. It doesn't require you having any skills in videography or content creation or filmmaking. It just involves you jotting down a few ideas, a few words, a few sentiments, and attaching the images there for you to enjoy at a later date. Now, the reasons why you do photography and why you choose to create the images you do and how you feel about those images is completely up to you. Photography is a completely personal thing. It's so subjective, so I'm by no means saying that all of this is something that you should do. But I think if you are looking to share your work more, if you're wanting to feel a bit more satisfaction and fulfillment in your photography, then these are some things that you could explore to help you maybe take that to the next level. So I hope you found some of these points useful and interesting. Thank you again for all the amazing feedback on last week's video. I do feel like as artists and creatives, you know, having that connection and finding that additional level of significance in our work is going to keep spurring us on to go out and keep creating. So that's been the main motivation for me to make this little mini series of videos, and let's keep that conversation going. So do put your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't seen last week's video, like I said, it is linked down there, so do go and check it out and weigh in on the conversation. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all the support, and I will see you all next week for another video.